On April 21, 1918, Manfred von Richthofen, the famed Red Baron of Germany, with a record-breaking 80 aerial victories, took off in his bright red triplane along with several squadron mates. The events of this day would spark a historical debate which has continued on for more than a century. Over the Somme Valley in France, they engaged a patrol of British Royal Air Force Sopwith camels. During the dogfight, one camel piloted by Lieutenant Wilfred May broke away, and the Baron gave chase at low altitude deep into Allied territory. Roy Brown, a Canadian pilot flying a Sopwith camel, dived steeply from above to help his comrade. At the same time, Allied ground troops in the trenches below also opened fire with their machine guns and rifles as the low-flying red triplane passed over. Amid the bursts of gunfire from both Brown's aircraft and multiple Australian units on the ground, the Red Baron's luck finally ran out. His triplane abruptly descended and crash-landed in a field, ending the aerial ace, just a few days shy of his 26th birthday. The Red Baron had broken one of his own tactical rules by flying low and fast over enemy lines, a risky maneuver that put him within range of ground fire. His death was a significant propaganda coup for the Allies, but almost immediately a debate began. Who fired the bullet that ultimately felled history's most famous fighter ace? Captain Roy Brown of Canada was the pilot who engaged Manfred von Richthofen from the air, and he was officially credited with shooting down the Red Baron in the immediate aftermath of the battle. Brown reported that he dove on the red triplane from behind while it was targeting Lieutenant May, and he fired a long and consistent burst at close range. According to Brown's combat report, the triplane went into a steep dive and crashed after his attack. Lieutenant May later affirmed that he saw Richthofen's plane go down and was completely convinced that Brown must have been the one who hit the Baron. In recognition of Brown's daring interception of Richthofen, a formal RAF Board of Inquiry credited Brown with the victory. This, of course, made him an instant hero as the man who vanquished the Red Baron. Brown's claim went largely unquestioned by the RAF at the time, and he received much public acclaim. In fact, the British had strong motivation to credit an airman. Manfred von Richthofen had long been the most coveted target, and the RAF had even offered rewards and an automatic Victoria Cross to any pilot who could defeat him. Brown himself was modest about the achievement, but officially he went down in history as the victor over the Red Baron. However, from the very start, there were dissenting voices and conflicting eyewitness accounts that suggested Brown might not have fired the shot. Almost as soon as Richthofen's triplane hit the ground, Australian ground troops on the scene asserted that their fire had brought him down, not Roy Brown. Several machine gun posts of the Australian Imperial Force were stationed along Richthofen's flight path near Moreland Court Ridge, and they had engaged the low-flying red triplane. Multiple soldiers claimed credit, but through the years, only one has been found to have any serious claim. This claimant was Sergeant Cedric Popkin, an anti-aircraft Vickers machine gunner of the 24th Machine Gun Company, who fired at the triplane from the ground. Popkin later recounted that he fired 2 bursts at the Red Baron, first as it approached his position, and a second time as it banked and flew away, presenting its side and back to him. It was during this second burst, as von Richthofen began turning away, that Popkin likely scored a hit. In a letter to Australia's official war historian, Popkin described tracking the red plane through a 180-degree turn and firing at it until it rolled and crashed. The angle of Popkin's fire, from the Baron's right side and slightly to the rear, matches well with the wound the Baron sustained. Australian witnesses on the ground noted that the red triplane's flight became erratic after Popkin's bursts, veering and almost stalling before crash landing. They took this as evidence that ground fire had mortally wounded the pilot. Central to unraveling the mystery is the forensic evidence from von Richthofen's wounds and the trajectory of the bullet. Allied medical officers conducted an autopsy on the fallen airman on the day of his death. They found that von Richthofen had been slain by a single bullet, which entered under his right armpit and traveled upward through his chest cavity before exiting near the left side of his chest. Notably, the same sort of ammo was used by all Allied weaponry at play on that day, so the ammo itself doesn't solve the problem. But to get back to the main point, in other words, the shot came from below and to the right of the Baron, coursing upward through his body. This trajectory is a crucial clue. If Captain Roy Brown had struck the Red Baron while diving from above and behind in his Sopwith Camel, the bullet path would be expected to travel downward into von Richthofen, not upward. Brown himself approached from the Baron's rear right at a higher altitude. It's difficult to reconcile Brown's attack angle with the wound's upward track, unless the Baron's plane was steeply banked at the exact moment Brown fired. Brown never mentioned such a steep bank in his combat report or later accounts. In fact, he described von Richthofen looking back at him during the chase, implying the triplane was roughly level. This casts significant doubt on whether Brown's bullets could have caused the wound. Another piece of evidence is the timing of von Richthofen's final actions. If Brown's burst had hit the Baron squarely through the chest, piercing his heart or lungs, von Richthofen would likely have lost consciousness almost instantly. He would have been unable to continue a controlled chase for as long as he did. Medical experts note that a wound through the heart or major vessels would have incapacitated the pilot within 20 seconds at most. This suggests that Brown's fire did not immediately end the Baron, and that the mortal wound was inflicted at the very end of the pursuit. That timeline better fits the accounts of the Australian gunners, who fired on the triplane just before it went into its fatal dive. The ballistic trajectory evidence aligns most neatly with Sergeant Popkin's firing position. Popkin's second burst was aimed at von Richthofen's right side as the triplane was turning away, which means his Vickers machine gun was shooting upward relative to the plane. That corresponds to the upward bullet path found in the body. That said, in theory, an unknown infantry rifleman on the ground could also have fired the shot from Richthofen's right flank. Several riflemen did take shots at the red plane as it passed overhead. This unknown soldier theory cannot be entirely dismissed, as any Lee Enfield firing the same sort of ammo could have caused the same wound if the timing and angle were just right. However, no specific rifleman ever came forward with convincing evidence, and the volume of machine gun fire makes it more likely a machine gunner hit the target. Given all the available data, most historians and forensic experts conclude that the shot almost certainly came from the ground, not from Roy Brown's camel. Popkin, being in the best position and having an optimal angle of fire, remains by far the top contender in the analysis of von Richthofen's demise. It's worth noting that the initial autopsy report back in 1918 didn't reach the same conclusion. The British surgeons who examined Manfred von Richthofen's body right after the crash believed that the bullet's angle was too steep to have come from ground fire. This led them to attribute the wound to Brown's attack from the air. This early assessment was accepted officially at the time, which is why Brown was credited. In hindsight, many historians consider that autopsy finding to be flawed, or at least incomplete. Others suspect that the findings of the British medical team at the time may not have been truly independent or fact-based. The idea that the Red Baron was shot down by ground-based soldiers likely wouldn't have had a similar propaganda effect as the greatest German aerial ace being bested by the RAF. Further, the Germans could have lessened the morale blow to their populace by claiming that the Red Baron hadn't really been felled in honorable aerial combat. Officially, the victory is still attributed to Roy Brown, despite significant evidence to the contrary. That said, even though it appears that Brown and the RAF didn't actually land the final blow, this isn't to diminish their role in the event. To the contrary, without Brown and Company essentially putting the Red Baron in a checkmate position. Popkin or an unknown rifleman would have never had the opportunity they were presented. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to check out my other channel, Lazy Chill Zone, for contemporary crime-related mysteries. Also be sure to take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with the history fans in your life. The Bosnian Pyramid theory revolves around the controversial claim that a group of hills in Visoko, Bosnia, and Herzegovina are ancient man-made pyramids. Since 2005, Bosnian researcher Samir Osmanagic has promoted these hills, especially Visočica Hill, which he calls the Pyramid of the Sun, as the world's largest pyramidal structures. According to Osmanagic, early Europeans built these pyramids around 12,000 to 30,000 years ago, predating known complex civilizations in the region. Although captivating public imagination and boosting tourism, mainstream archaeologists and geologists overwhelmingly dismiss these claims as pseudoscience at best. Supporters assert several key claims in relation to the Bosnian pyramids, many of which are extremely controversial. Supporters generally frame these alleged pyramids as evidence of a lost advanced civilization, potentially rewriting European prehistory. Further, many of these supporters are ardent Bosnian nationalists who are eager to rewrite European and world prehistory around their nation. Supporters' focus is around the main hill, the Pyramid of the Sun, which measures roughly 720 feet high, allegedly dwarfing Egypt's Great Pyramid. Proponents argue its geometric shape indicates intentional human engineering. Osmanagic claims the Bosnian structures form, quote, the greatest pyramidal complex globally, and were built during Europe's Ice Age period. Advocates highlight precise alignment of the Pyramid of the Sun to the cardinal directions, arguing this indicates deliberate architectural planning. They also note the pyramid's symmetrical shape and flat summit, suggesting human shaping. Excavations organized by Osmanagic's foundation uncovered stone slabs on hillsides, interpreted as ancient building materials, or concrete blocks shaped by prehistoric builders. Radar and thermal scans have also reportedly detected organized human-made structures or tunnels beneath the hills. Proponents highlight tunnels in Visoko as part of a larger network connecting pyramids. Osmanagic claims these tunnels contain monolithic stones, carvings, and artifacts older than 15,000 years, implying a complex ancient construction. And keep that in mind because I'll be coming back to this claim specifically in a moment. Despite captivating the public, Osmanagic's claims fail to meet scientific scrutiny, according to experts. Geologists unanimously identify the Visoko Hills as natural formations known as flatirons, steep triangular slopes formed by natural erosion. Analysis by a local university confirmed the hills consist of alternating layers of conglomerate rock, sandstone, and clay, consistent with natural geological processes. Upon further examination from outside experts, the formation has been described as completely mundane. Additionally, the supposed ancient concrete is widely recognized as natural conglomerate stone by geologists who've examined it. Archaeologists emphasize the absence of legitimate artifacts consistent with a pyramid-building civilization. Despite years of excavation, Osmanagic's team has not found pottery, tools, bones, inscriptions, or infrastructure that would accompany monumental construction. Experts argue that such a structure, if it were actually what he claimed, would be ripe with all these findings. Further, many alleged man-made structures, such as stone blocks, slabs, and terraces, are natural rock formations, fractured into geometric shapes. Experts note that excavation methods may have exaggerated or artificially enhanced these natural appearances to mislead observers. Furthermore, reports emerged indicating that some quote-unquote ancient inscriptions were recent carvings. This suggests the strong possibility that evidence has been fabricated to fit the pyramid narrative, further undermining credibility. Notably, in the fervor to prove that these sites constitute pyramids, actual historical sites have been damaged. Given the prominence of Visosika Hill, which pyramid advocates claim is the Pyramid of the Sun, it should come as no surprise that it was used for medieval fortifications. Samir Osmanagic's team has been accused of having damaged this cultural heritage while attempting to prove that the hill is actually a pyramid. This has naturally led to significant criticism from mainstream historians, who may otherwise have seen this as a relatively harmless, though pseudo-archaeological exercise. Perhaps just as interesting as the Bosnian pyramids theory is why this mystery has caught on to such a degree in Bosnia itself. The popularity of the theory can likely be partly understood through sociological theories that examine how societies respond to collective trauma and search for identity after devastation. Following the Bosnian War, which left deep scars on the national psyche and physical landscape, many people looked for narratives that could restore a sense of pride and belonging. The theory taps into a desire to rewrite history in a way that offers hope, resilience, and perhaps most importantly, renewal. One theory suggests that in the aftermath of conflict, communities are more receptive to alternative histories that promise a lost golden age. In a country that suffered immense devastation, the idea of an ancient civilization with advanced knowledge provides a counterbalance to memories of recent suffering. The Bosnian pyramid narrative becomes a symbolic reclamation of a glorious past, one that contrasts sharply with the recent horrors of war. This reimagined heritage not only creates a unifying myth, but also offers tangible benefits, such as boosting tourism and fostering local economic recovery. And to put this in perspective, this town that would have otherwise been unremarkable gets up to 200,000 tourists a year now. Nikola Tesla was a visionary inventor whose New York City laboratory was a hub of groundbreaking electrical experiments in the 1890s. By 1895, Tesla's lab on South Fifth Avenue had become the epicenter of his research into alternating current, wireless lighting, and early radio technology. The equipment and prototypes housed there represented years of work and innovation. All of that changed in a single night when a sudden blaze consumed the building, marking a devastating turn in Tesla's career. In the early morning hours before dawn on March 13, 1895, disaster struck Tesla's lab. A fire broke out in the downtown Manhattan building at the South Fifth Avenue unit that housed his workspace on the 4th floor. A night watchman on duty had just been tending the basement furnace. When he returned to the ground floor, he discovered flames had completely engulfed everything. He exited the building and alerted the authorities immediately. By the time firefighters arrived, flames were roaring through the stairwells and the elevator shaft of the 6-story structure. The building was also occupied by a steam fitter supply company, and the floors were soaked with machine oils that helped the flames spread with frightening speed. Firefighters battled the inferno for over 3 hours, but the structure burned quickly. The heat grew so intense it even ignited parts of a nearby elevated railway line. By dawn, the fire was finally controlled, but Tesla's lab was completely destroyed. The entire 4th floor collapsed into the stories below, burying the remnants of Tesla's machinery, tools, and notes under charred debris. When morning came, the extent of the loss was clear. Virtually all of Tesla's inventions, equipment, and research notes had been reduced to ashes. Priceless models and prototypes, including those Tesla had displayed at the 1893 World's Fair, were gone. Tesla was crushed by this sudden ruin. Witnesses say he paced in front of the smoldering wreckage in disbelief and grief. Financially, the fire was a severe blow. Tesla estimated at least $50,000 in damage to his work, an absolutely huge sum at the time, and none of it was insured. The scientific community and the public responded with an outpouring of sympathy. Newspapers lamented the calamity, with one editorial calling the destruction of Tesla's lab a misfortune to the whole world. For investigators, the pressing question was what sparked the blaze. Official inquiries at the time were hampered by the complete destruction of the interior, but they determined that the fire started on the building's ground floor, well below Tesla's lab. All evidence pointed to an accident. The ground level and basement were work areas filled with flammable substances, making them prime candidates for the fire's origin. One likely scenario was that an open flame, such as a gas light the watchman left burning, ignited the oil-soaked surroundings. The blaze's rapid spread was clearly fueled by the building's hazardous contents. Investigators found no indication of foul play or sabotage. In their report, the fire was ultimately attributed to an unfortunate accident, a common hazard in an era of open gas lighting and combustible materials. Over time, several alternative theories have emerged to explain the cause of the 1895 lab fire. Some have wondered if one of Tesla's own experimental devices or electrical systems might have triggered the fire. Some modern theorists have wondered if a machine could have overheated, or a stray spark from a high-voltage coil could have smoldered and ignited something after hours. This theory, however, isn't backed by contemporary reports or evidence. Tesla and his assistants had left for the night, and the blaze, according to all evidence that we have, began on a different floor. Perhaps the most common theory is that the fire was no accident at all, but an intentional act by someone who wanted to halt Tesla's work. Tesla's breakthroughs with alternating current and his futuristic ideas made him a high-profile figure who some rivals or industrial interests might have seen as a threat. In this scenario, a competitor or disgruntled foe could have set the blaze on purpose to sabotage him. However, there is no proof of any such plot. The official investigation found no hint of arson, and Tesla himself never accused anyone of wrongdoing. Given their history of bad blood, Thomas Edison is frequently hinted at as the mastermind behind the fire. While it's entirely possible that industrial sabotage was involved, especially given the state of forensic investigations in 1895, there's simply no evidence to support it. Personally, I see the more interesting mystery here as not how the fire started, or if one of Tesla's rivals was involved. Rather, I wonder what sort of state-of-the-art inventions went up in smoke, and what exactly was contained in his lost papers. Given the exponential nature of scientific progress, and given that the fire happened in 1895, I have to wonder how much more advanced we would be if it hadn't happened. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be us, but the equivalent humans in the same situation.